They left that place and came to Capernaum. Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered over to human hands. He will be killed, and after 3 days he will rise." This is the second time Jesus talks about his death, and there will be a third. But what's interesting about that passage is it starts by saying they left that place and went to Capernaum. Now that place is Caesarea Philippi in the far north, and Capernaum is on the Sea of Galilee. This is at least the 15th time in 9 chapters that Mark has told us that Jesus moved from one place to another. It's almost as if Mark is as interested in the geography of Jesus as the history. He's interested in what Jesus did, but he's also interested in where he did it. And so he gives us these 15 journeys of Jesus. And it's interesting to note that all of them take place in the northern part of Israel. He hardly ever went south of Nazareth. And I put up the Bible references for that, so if you want to, you can go to my website, you'll find this slide, and you can study it for yourself. But there's going to be a 16th journey in chapter 10, verse 1. And that journey will be different from the others, because it will be a journey south, and a long way south. If we look on a bigger map, he goes all the way down to a place called Judea across Jordan, very near to Jericho, well on the way to Jerusalem. Now, Jesus talked about his death 3 times. The first was at Caesarea Philippi, as far north as Jesus ever went, as far as he ever got from Jerusalem. The second was in Capernaum, a third of the way to Jerusalem. But the third was down at Judea across Jordan, very close to Jerusalem and well on the way there. Now, why did Jesus talk about his death 3 times? Well, firstly, I think because the disciples were very slow to take in the need for Jesus' death. It's strange how Christians can be so slow to grasp the fundamentals of their faith. But I think there was a bigger reason. It's that his death was weighing very heavily on his mind. He knew when, where, and how he was going to die. Now, God has given us a great blessing that we don't know. There's a very powerful little poem called 8 o'clock, which describes a condemned man in his cell counting the hours of his night before his execution, and he listens to the clock tower tossing the hours carelessly over the town, and yet they're the last hours of his life. It's intolerable. But Jesus knew, and in spite of knowing, he sets his face towards Jerusalem. That's one of the great examples of courage, submissiveness, and servanthood in the history of the world. And the irony of this passage is that no sooner has Jesus talked about his death than the disciples behind his back are talking about who will be the greatest. What is it in human nature that makes us so concerned about position and status? And it's very fundamental. Even a child of 2, if he senses his brother and sister are getting preferential treatment, he'll bring the house down. That's why Cain killed Abel. The philosopher Nietzsche proposed a theory that the will to power was the most powerful force in human nature, more powerful even than the will to survive. And he said the pleasure of satisfying the hunger to overpower others is the greatest pleasure in the world. I guess that explains the world's obsession with sport. And he gave a corollary that because of this, it's natural for the human race to move towards what he called the Übermensch, the superior beings. I think he meant a group of people rather than a single Superman. Now, these teachings actually paved the way for Nazism. Now, to be fair to him, he didn't intend that at all. He actually wasn't even German. He was quite proud to be Polish, and he was very against any anti-Semitism. But his sister and her husband took his philosophies and popularized them and prepared the ground for Nazism, so that when Hitler arose with his power and his lust for power, he was greatly admired. And when he talked about a super race, the ground was fertile. But the problem with the idea of a super race is that it also implies inferior races, and that paved the way for the Holocaust. This great desire for power and position, and it's so contrary to the example and the teaching of Jesus. He takes a child and puts the child on his lap. That tells you something about Jesus. Children don't easily go and sit on the lap of a stranger. but the child must have sensed something special. And he says to his disciples, if you want to be the greatest, you've got to become the least of all and the servant of all. Isn't it strange how few Christians really manage to grasp that and put it into their lifestyle? Not everyone. When I was a child, we had a nativity play at church, and right in the middle of the nativity play, one of the shepherds vomited on the stage right in front of the manger, and the whole congregation froze, except for the minister, who rushed to the kitchen, grabbed a towel, rushed on stage and started cleaning up the mess, with a little smile on his face to set everyone at ease, and a little pat on the boy's head. And that was perhaps my first real lesson, that if you want to be the greatest, you must be the servant of all.